super interesting subject matter. We're going to be talking to Mr. Bob Fletcher, a retired investigative researcher. However, I think the investigations are still running, and he's conducted probes into CIA's involvement in the US drug trade. His report was presented to several congressmen, including Sonny Bono. Since then, he's turned his attention to the return of Planet X and Nibiru, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Bob's got a new DVD out, which is, well, it's mind-blowing. This is going to blow the socks off anything that's really been out there before, no doubt. And of course, you want to check out Bob's personal page. It's bobfletcherinvestigations.com. Get over to Bob's site, have a look at the media and the videos that he's produced before, and you'll also see the DVD that we're going to talk about today. I believe the DVD is out at the moment, so we're going to get to talk about Bob. We're going to get a little bio on him as well, and see how things go from there. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure. We've done a couple of shows out of the USA mainland, so to speak, and what we have affects everybody on the face of the earth.
That's for sure.
It's a pretty amazing. I kind of stumbled into it investigating the loss and the disappearance of large amounts of money out of the United States budget, and I started tracking that about 3 years ago, and it directed me into a mind-boggling, kind of an amazing investigation.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Bob, because this is very pertinent. You're not just some guy that kind of dreams up some fanciful thing from Zechariah Sitchin's book and writes a little blog about it. This is actually pertinent to you because you're a patriot, Bob. You're a businessman, an investigator, a film producer, a radio personality, author, and federal witness. And like I say, you have patriotic reasons for doing this. I mean, you're talking about black budget money going missing for a possible cataclysm. Who knows? I mean, Bob, let's get into this. This is your reasons for doing this, no?
Yes. What happened, and very briefly, which folks can look at my website and you can kind of catch up to people that don't know who I am or what I have been doing. I've actually been chasing corruption in government for almost 30 years at this point in time, since the 80s when I became a federal witness related to, and it's too complex to get into, so I won't take our time up today on it, but I had a business, and that business I merged with another business corporation here in America, in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was, in fact, a covert Central Intelligence and National Security supplier of weapons, and they were utilizing my company, which was a toy company, they were utilizing it as a covert front for doing the operations that they had been doing all around the globe, and that is supplying weapons for the White House of the United States of America for all these wars that they've been doing for, God knows, 75 years. So, to my surprise, I ended up with my toy company being in the middle of what was, in fact, Central Intelligence secret arms supply operations. And from that point forward, I became a federal witness, and I started doing investigations on the behalf of senators and congressmen here in the United States. And that what I literally have done full time for so many years. But 3-4 years ago, I realized that way above the normal thievery that we have here in America with congressmen and senators under the table stealing millions of dollars for a whole variety of things, and of course even being involved with drug smuggling with our own military, et cetera, et cetera. But above and beyond that, I realized a few years ago that there was not just millions of dollars being disappearing from budgets, but I realized it was billions, and then it even became trillions with a T, and which was actually out of the mouth of the man that was in charge of our Defense Department here, Donald Rumsfeld. And he admitted that they had lost $2.3 trillion from his defense budgets.
And when I remember watching the footage when Donald Rumsfeld was answering to that. I mean, he didn't seem to care too much. I mean, when you talk about trillions of dollars going missing, that's a massive thing, Bob. I'm sorry, that could cripple a country, like.
Well, and of course the point, and that was not in a short period of time. He was referring actually probably over a 10-year period of time. But still, those kinds of dollars vanishing was rather outrageous. And then, of course, we have, and I have to mention this because it was crucial to this story. He made that announcement on the floor of the United States Congress before the Senate and the Congress, and he made that the day before the infamous 9/11 terrorist event here in the United States.
And the computer went missing. The computer.
Therefore, we never heard about it again. In other words, 9/11, of course, totally took over all the news, and that was the end of it. And his 2.3 trillion was never looked at past that date.
Yeah,
because of the timing.
Yeah, and the computer that was allegedly hit by the Pentagon was the one that held this missing records, 2.3 trillion.
Yes, again, a coincidence.
What a coincidence,
the very best records that would have maybe helped someone track that disappearing money was, in fact, in the offices that were burned and destroyed by whatever it was that hit the side of the Pentagon on that 9/11 event.
Mm-hmm. So, the reason I mention all this, Bob, and I'm glad you went into that little bit of background, and like I say, people can get that on BobFletcherInvestigations.com and see all about your history, but it's pertinent, Bob, and because you're a no-nonsense guy, you're a no-nonsense researcher, this is very, very serious to you, and like I say, you've been a federal witness. You were involved with people.
Certainly, and I had, what had taken place was my material and my investigations had been highly respected. I had dealt with Senator John Kerry, who today is, of course, the Secretary of State for the United States. I had dealt with them for a couple of years with several inquiries, and I had actually been involved with something like 8 very serious major investigations. Many of the investigation information that I delivered to certain persons in Washington actually were classified top secret after I delivered the material to them, and they were actually classified. Mm-hmm. But and you make a good point, because the idea of myself looking into something like Planet X, which is what Nibiru, one of the names for this planet,
sure.
Nibiru, Planet X, the Destroyer, the Flaming Dragon, which the Chinese called it. Mm-hmm. Myself even putting my name to something like that, I commonly would not touch that with a 50-foot pole. I would not even want to have my name associated with it. But what happened in my situation, as I started tracking the money disappearing, and I found these large, giant amounts of money, just like you said, Donald Rumsfeld just sort of said it, announced the loss of 2.3 trillion as if it was an everyday occurrence. And then I realized we have 1 or 2 good people here in government, and I'm saying that very straight face. The numbers of the good guys, I'm afraid, is much smaller than the numbers of criminals. But what happened was that I saw that a fellow named Ron Paul, one of our representatives here in the United States, wanted to know where the gold was that's supposedly in Fort Knox, and he had requested from the Federal Reserve Corporation. He had requested that they do an audit on the gold, because there was such a tremendous amount of rumors that the gold was not even there any longer. And when he put in his request for an audit, they laughed at him and they said, Representative Paul. Yes, sir.
Wow. Bob, let's go straight to Nibiru. I mean, we'll jump back and forth.
Sure.
We'll jump back and forth with the black budget, missing money, and underground bases, and cataclysms, and all that. We'll get to that. But I mean, the big question the listeners are going to want to know: number one, is Planet X, is Nibiru real? Is it in the solar system? Is Nibiru in our solar system? Is it incoming? And this is what the DVD is, Bob. So we'll launch straight into the listener's question. And a lot of people know you're coming on today, so they're all excited about to hear what you got to say. But is it in the system? Is it real?
Well, yes, and what I was saying is that my inquiry tried to figure out what this tremendous amount of money would go to, and the point was that I discovered that they had been creating in the United States this huge number, over 100 very major underground hideout survival facilities for the American, for the elite. A very limited few when you talk about the entire population. They had spent, that's where the money had all gone, including the gold from Fort Knox. And they have been since about 1983, 86, 85, around that point of time, they had started very intensely in creating hideouts, survival hideouts for the elite limited few. Now, I'm talking about, anyhow, they're extraordinary. We're talking highways and train rail cars underground all over the United States, and facilities with the capability to hold tens of, maybe 20,000 people in one single location.
Wow,
So
incredible.
when I started looking and I realized that, and by the way, we have films of these underground facilities and footage and photographs, etc., and all the information on them. What I had discovered is that around the globe, not only the United States, but all of the other major nations of the world, Russia and China and the European countries, have in fact been building these underground hideouts, and that led me to the fact that they had finally gotten the information sometime in the early 80s at the highest levels of our government. They'd gotten the final word from scientists that in fact the Planet X was, not only did it exist, but it was probably headed back in, and they created a time schedule for themselves as to when they had to run and hide and get in underground into these hideouts and close the doors behind them. And so that was all of just the superfluous information about where the money went. That's where it had disappeared.
The IRIS satellite in 1984, I think it was, picked up this like a brown dwarf, red dwarf star, Nemesis, probably Planet X if you ask me, and nothing's ever been here. It was swept under the carpet. Could that be the event, Bob, that when these guys found out in the 80s? Could it be as early as 1984 when these guys found out? Is it probably due to the IRIS satellite data?
Well, yes, I believe that probably was the first real serious event where they came back, into the White House with briefings and said, it appears that this is real, and now what are we going to do about it? Here for so many years, of course, multiple governments have been trying to move into the world government, and what has happened is they slowed down with that and started, like I said, creating these wonderful hideouts. Mm-hmm. They also, I must say, when they got with all the other nations at the very highest level, they created a thing called a seed vault. Now, actually, there are three of them, but these are the main primary one, which was completed in 2006 or 2012, actually, that period of time. That's in Norway, Denmark area, and that is a huge underground facility with all of the seeds necessary to replant the entire surface of the earth, to regenerate living, growing plants when, in fact, they were all totally wiped from the surface of the earth. So this is a international cooperative structure, and that is finished as we speak today. That has been completed, and the literally has the ability to replenish and replant when they come back from underneath their hideouts inside their underground facilities.
Yeah, the Valborg seed vault in Norway, it's because it's so cold up there and it's tunneled into rock. It's extremely safe from cataclysms, floods. It's got the right temperature to protect these seeds in vast amounts of time. Credible that they're taking on that project. It's very indicative of something. I think the point to make, Bob, it's very indicative of an obsessive program, and I think this is probably to do with the underground bases too. It seems to be they're obsessed with these things because they have motive, Bob. I firmly believe they are not obsessive for no reason. I mean, they must have a motive for this, Bob.
Right, and what bothered me when I realized that in fact all of this money was just gone, and of course we also for many years here in America have failed to do any repairs or reparation on all of our infrastructure, our bridges and all of those things, which commonly you have to maintain. And almost everything we have in infrastructure here in the United States is like 75 years old. And we're talking bridges and underwater tunnels going into New York City, and all of the electronics, the generation systems, they're all antique and they're not being repaired. So, in other words, they've thrown those to the wind and concentrated with all of every dollar they could steal down into these underground hideouts. And so it was a matter of what in the world would have scared all the leaders of the earth simultaneously to start building underground facilities.
I think
the Chinese have gone into old tunnels that they had so many of and refinished those the same as America has done. They built some new ones, but they had already 1,000 old tunnels, so it was easier. They have huge burrowing, digging machines, the machines that they have utilized to go underground and dig these underground facilities are mind-boggling. You can go one time with one of these drills into the side of a mountain and pull it back out and drive two 18-wheelers in behind it. Mm-hmm. So that's how large these facilities are.
Sure. I think you know what I like about your research, Bob, is you're not just a Nibiru guy, or you're not just going on about underground bases. You're putting this all in a package because it is all linked and it all screams the same thing. The gold is going missing. The gold is being stockpiled. The seeds are being protected for a catalysm. And the bases are being built to withstand the catalysm. And then we had the Nibiru, the supposed cause of this catalysm. Let's focus on Nibiru. I get bombarded with YouTube videos of disinformation out there. I think there's a lot of good information out there. Is Nibiru visible with the naked eye? Do we know anything about the visibility of this thing as we speak?
No, well, not at this point in time, genuinely. It would require infrared telescopes of extreme high capabilities for one thing. The best shots, of course, are the ones that no one is going to show us, and that is done, of course, by the government-owned huge telescopic locations and the infrared telescopes that have the ability to potentially see those planets that do not have their own illumination. And we're talking about a planet's situation that, by the way, the size has been calculated to be potentially 5 times the size of Earth. Mm-hmm. And it supposedly has 4 to 5 of its own moons that actually drags along with it. And the story, and again, my inquiries, I opened the door and opened my mind to look at this, and I was very skeptical originally. But once I got into an understanding of the astronomers and the scientific researchers that have spent an entire half of their lives just dedicated to trying to track this, and I realized that there was entirely too much reality to it. And the idea is that this particular planet goes out to an extreme and then comes back in again to go around the sun, similar to Halley's Comet, which is a 75-year cycle of orbit. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they had a Hale-Bopp comet that goes out 4,200 years on an orbit. So it would take that long for it to come back and go around. Now, once I found out that that was a reality, then the idea of a planet coming back in 3,000 years became very potentially logical, because we do know that comets do as long as 4,000-year cycles, or orbital cycle. So originally I thought 3,000 years was ridiculous, but then and so I had to depend on the experts, and that's what I've done. We put together this DVD. It took me 3 years to accomplish this. I tried to answer every possible question in the DVD. And of course, a big one is, why can't we just see it? Why can't we just see this thing? Well, for starters, until it gets closer, it's entirely too far away. So that's that simple. Mm-hmm. Now, another problem is it may potentially be coming in on a 30-degree off of our the common, what they call the plane of the ecliptic, which is what all the planets are on, a reasonably flat plane doing their orbits around the sun.
Sure.
It is the possibility that Nibiru is from 30 degrees off, and that would make it extra difficult to see.
Incredible. At some point, Bob, bear with me on this. At some point, sure, this is going to be visible as a star or whatever, and it's going to get into the cat's going to get out of the bag. The public's going to know about it at some point. What's going to happen at that point, Bob, to the planet?
And that's true. And there have been both. I want to say there's 2 good groups that have been investigating this from an astronomical scientific point for several years, and there's a little bit of a conflict between the 2, and no one knows yet which one is going to turn out to be correct. One point is that one group feels that it is that it comes around 350 orbit, which would mean that it would be in a 3,000 period of time, that it actually passed close by Earth 10 times. There's another group that thinks that it only comes around every 3,000 to 3,600 years, and that would mean that it would just be passing close one time during that period. So there's a kind of a mixture there on which is which. The other problem between the two groups is whether it comes in straight or if it's coming in below at an angle. So additionally, the problem is that if it's on the other side of the sun from our vantage point, from our viewing point, when it is on the other side of the sun, it would of course not be visible at all. Now we have to realize we had a couple of years ago when the Russians had a huge meteorite that came in and it crashed into the Russian tundra and exploded just above the ground, and it was quite a big news media event that no one not even our professional highest level persons with the best telescopes saw that or knew that was coming in. And that big question was put on the head of our NASA on the floor of the Congress, and they asked him, why was it that we didn't see it? And he simply said that if it's coming from behind the sun and from our vantage point looking toward that direction, we will not be able to see it until it's already in the atmosphere. And that's the same situation with Nibiru. The first sighting, it has been mutually agreed, will probably, and the reason for this is going by ancient history, biblical writings, history from the monks on top of the Tibetan mountains, and the history written by the old emperors of China who actually tracked this thing back when it came in many years ago and came close to the Earth and caused many problems. All of those are historically logged in black and white. And the agreement seems to be that it will come closest during the time of March and April of whatever year it actually passes close. So it will be first seen, once it's close enough to be visually seen, probably in about December, and then December, January, February, and then March and April, it will be coming closer and closer. We will see it as a star in the month of December, and then the following April, March or April, is when it will be closest to pass around the sun and back out again. And the belief, which has been mutually agreed upon by most of all the people into this, is that we will pass through the tail. We will not collide with it, but through the debris tail 2 times. One time when it comes in and goes behind the sun, and then a second time after it has already passed around the sun and heads back out to far reaches of our solar system, once again to disappear. During that time will be about 155 days of our own orbital running around the sun, our own orbit. We will go through the tail 2 times. During that period of time, we will be pulverized by meteorites, a huge number. We have no idea how long the possible tail of this thing is, but what they do know, the Hale comet drags a 24 million mile tail behind it.
Wowzer. Let's focus on the DVD for a moment. The DVD is 4 hours long. What can people expect to see on the DVD in terms of bullet points or information or subject matter?
The DVD, again, it was tremendous amount of time, money, and effort that went into this. And amazingly, I actually had to edit it down profusely, but it still remains to be a double DVD. It's two discs, and actually is 4 hours in total length. It's an entire library of information. And when I tried to, not just the political background and showing people the actual underground hideouts with live footage and photographs, etc., and I explained even the world's participation in the creating of the hideouts for the limited few, so to speak. But we give it the scientific background, the biblical background, and all of the information that actually has been generated and logged in, so to speak, for so many years. But we give the superfluous information around, like the fact that they have been progressively arming our sheriff's departments and our police departments with military weapons since approximately 1990, and they have increased that over and over, and that is because they are creating a huge localized, militarized police agencies that will be able to attempt to control the riots that will take place when people finally realize what's going on with an incoming disastrous situation. This planet will genuinely create Noah's floods over again. The floods that we read about in biblical accounts was actually created and caused by Nibiru. It has already affected all of the planets. I explain that also. Literally, the surface of all the planets are changing, starting a couple of years ago. They're changing in terms of the surface, the weather, and the chemistry, etc. on all of our planets. And it started way out towards Pluto and is coming inward. The weather that we are experiencing right today, which, as a matter of fact, today in the United States of America, they anticipate breaking over 100 weather records just today and tomorrow and yesterday. Those records are the most outrageous winter that has ever been. Now, in my DVD, I very specifically predicted that due to Nibiru, we will see the worst in 2015 that we have ever seen, and that now, bearing in mind, I completed that production about 6 or 7 months ago on the DVD, and today we are witnessing exactly what I put in the DVD. Now, I'm not some kind of a spook. I'm not a psychic. I'm not a seer or anything like that. But this is just actual reality of what was to take place as this thing slowly starts affecting the entire galactic system of our solar system. The sun has been acting out extraordinarily strange in very frightening manners with the solar flares. The temperature of the entire globe, they talk about warming, seeing is potentially the movement into literally an ice age that could last for 15 to 20 years. And it's basically due to the incoming of Nibiru. Everything, and matter of fact, I covered other things because I looked into the religious side of this because my feeling was that for example, the Catholic religion, which is so large worldwide, they a couple of years ago cut a deal with the United States government, and actually the Pope and his organizational people at the highest levels went to Arizona and built an infrared telescope that they own and we cooperatively run for them. And they put that in a few years ago, and it was one of the few telescopes with the capability of seeing Nibiru. And strangely enough, the Vatican, which genuinely owns it in our state of Arizona, they named that telescope Lucifer, yeah. Which I thought was rather a little. Actually,
what a reach! What a reach to get that acronym to work. I mean, what a reach of imagination to get the abbreviation of all the words to spell out Lucifer. Incredible.
Yeah, and of course, theoretically, it's the light. They said it's the bearing bearing light, and going back to the original name of Lucifer. I have no idea. In reality, it sounds rather demonic to me, as opposed to something that we would expect out of the Vatican.
Sure.
But the Vatican is completely up to speed on this, and I believe that because someone came to me and I didn't include it in the DVD because I was unable to get enough realistic information. But many people that have been investigating the Fatima, the miracle at Fatima, which was, of course, the children that got this message that theoretically was the end times message and had been kept secret by the Vatican for so many years. I was contacted by an organization that actually studies it. There's nothing but that miracle of Fatima. They said that they think that the incoming of Nibiru is probably the last secret that has been kept by the Vatican on the miracle of Fatima. Wow. So again, that was kind of left field, and I didn't bother including that.
I want to come back to the Vatican, Bob. I got to interject. Okay, so this is going to come. This is going to come into our skies at some moment in time, Bob. We're going to be aware of this sometime sooner rather than later. But when we do know, and we're definite, and we see it with the visible eye, eventually, obviously the cataclysms are going to come later. How bad they will be, I'm not quite sure. But there's going to be a time frame in the middle there where the cat's out of the bag. When are they going to make a play to get underground into their bases? They can't do that until they have to. What is there? Is there going to be? Is the mass hysteria on this planet? By the way, on a mass hysteria, I think if UFOs landed, I don't think anybody would have mass hysteria. But if you see a cat, you're going to have mass hysteria.
Yes, yeah. There's no question about that. And a lot of people have asked me, when did I think that they were going to tell us about this, and how would they go about doing that? The bottom line is they are never, ever going to officially announce that there is anything strange coming in from outer space, or inner space, actually, in this case, within our own solar system. They're never going to be able to announce that at all. So we sit back and we say, well, what's going to happen? Well, the fact that, as I just mentioned, they've been arming our police departments with all of this profuse hand grenade launchers, armored vehicles, and all of these things that are commonly strictly military pieces of equipment. Okay? Mm-hmm. What they have done is they are preparing for martial law. And what they will do, they will utilize some synthetic reason to declare martial law. Now, I will say, more than likely, this will be a cooperative situation where martial law will be declared in European countries, in the United States, and, of course, any of the other, including even Russia and China, mm-hmm. Although they're all sort of living under a martial law kind of a structure already. But the United States will have to declare a martial law. I'm calculating 3 to 4 months, a few months prior to a time when people start around the globe new star in the sky. So once they already have martial law, they've already got the ability to just arrest and clamp down and hit people over the head or whatever they think's necessary. That will be done under a pretense. Now, the pretense is probably going to be one of 3 particular items. And by the way, all of this is in the DVD as well. Mm-hmm. It will be probably either a potential of a serious conflict with Russia, between the United States and Russia, or it will be an expanded situation in the United States with terrorism. And by that I mean saying that would hit 4, 5, 6 places across the United States of America of any kind. It can be anything, but as long as it's simultaneous and it's rather large, like 9/11s over again, in several parts of the country. Or the third one, they may utilize an epidemic, a medical epidemic, such as Ebola or some other disease that all of a sudden breaks out and appears to be threatening the lives of all of the people across the country. So it has to be, and a matter of fact, this is coming out of their own mandates that they put down in black and white many years ago, and that is that if and when something like martial law is decreed, it would have to be of a concern great enough that the average American physically would fear for their lives and the lives of their families. But they're not going to tell us, look up in the sky, there's a big thing coming in. That's never going to happen. They will use some phony reason. Now, again, all of this was put into my DVD. You have to realize a year ago, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12 months ago, mm-hmm. while I was in the production of the DVD, the information, and everything I just said has now come forward to the forefront. The United States is discussing today whether to confront Russia one-on-one on their aggression outside of the Russian-Ukraine area. That's today. That's being discussed. We have miscellaneous diseases that they're scaring the public with here in the United States, including the Ebola breakout, but also smaller things like measles. But then the third one being terrorism, that speaks for itself. As of today now, we have the ISIS situation. Anybody at all could create a full flag situation tomorrow or next week, call it a product of the ISIS people, have it take place in 5 different states in the United States, and all of the people of America would welcome martial law without even questioning it.
Oh, wonderful, Bob. Well, what a prolific DVD. How has it been received so far? What's the public opinion? Are they absorbing it?
Fantastic. Excuse me, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Just say, I was going to say,
it has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Go ahead and finish your
Well, I was going to say,
question.
are they absorbing it or accepting it or both?
It's been, I was overwhelmed. I did one large radio show back just in December, 2 months back. From that single program, we had 180,000 hits on our computer in 24 hours.
Wow.
I was overwhelmed. The people that have received it, the feedback is phenomenal. The people are just coming back and they're simply saying, oh my God, this is you put all of the points together, you connected everything, it all makes sense, and if we're not dead positive on the exact time of this thing, which nobody is, except that there is one group that's been studying this thing for like 20 years, and they are saying the potential is that we will see this thing coming in December, and that meant that within 3 or 4 months it would be passing close enough to cause all the serious problems. The acceptance of it has blown me away, because when I first did this, as I said earlier, this is like, this has been sort of like almost just a phantom planet, like some kind of a mystical thing. But and I didn't want to put my name onto it when I first got started. I said, I don't know whether I want to do this. But then it became a necessity. I feel, not that it's going to save many people, but I feel that everybody should understand what is potentially coming over the side of the mountain and into our backyard. And I absolutely am positive. Unfortunately, I wish I was wrong. I hope you can have me back in a year and you can throw stones at me. Because, boy, you're the biggest jerk we ever had on, and you were so far off. But I am afraid all of the things, politically, financially, et cetera, all of it just heads in one direction, and that is the incoming of the Nibiru.
Let's go back to the underground facilities, Bob.
Yes, sir.
What's your take let's go straight in. What's your take on Colorado Airport? Do you think there's something underneath the airport there, a secret base?
Well, interestingly enough, back when I was just profusely involved with doing investigations for congressional and Senate personalities and doing a variety of investigations with that, I had been getting tremendous amount of people telling me that the Denver airport was one of these underground facilities. Now, this is a long time. This literally was towards the beginning of 1995, the first few months of 95. And that's a long time ago. And I always just put all that stuff on the back burner. I had no reason to look at it. There was nothing that connected anything to anything else. So, however, I was getting people sending me what was videotapes and also good still photographs of several of these facilities, including the one underground there at the Denver airport. I knew personally a fellow whose in-laws were involved with the financing of some of that. So I kind of had a good one-on-one. And when the airport itself was, quote-unquote, finished and open to the public, which was in 95, I went, and myself and a young lady, we were able to sneak underground, into the facilities underground, and they were right. It is a gigantic underground operation, which, by the way, I have to point this out, that was in 95, and as I speak today, they are still physically digging holes and expanding that facility underground. And I do have photographs of that as well, and that's also included in the DVDs. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting subject matter. We're going to be talking to Mr. Bob Fletcher, a retired investigative researcher. However, I think the investigations are still running, and he's conducted probes into CIA's involvement in the U.S. drug trade. His report was presented to several congressmen, including Sonny Bono. Since then, he's turned his attention to the return of Planet X and Nibiru, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Bob's got a new DVD out, which is, well, it's mind-blowing. This is going to blow the socks off anything that's really been out there before, no doubt. And, of course, you want to check out Bob's personal page is bobfletcherinvestigations.com. Get over to Bob's site, have a look at the media and the videos that he's produced before, and you'll also see the DVD that we're going to talk about today. I believe the DVD is out at the moment, so we're going to get to talk about Bob. We're going to get a little bio on him as well, and see how things go from there. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, a real pleasure. We've done a couple of shows out of the USA mainland, so to speak, and what we have affects everybody on the face of the earth.
That's for sure.
It's pretty amazing. I kind of stumbled into it investigating the loss and the disappearance of large amounts of money out of the United States budget, and I started tracking that about 3 years ago, and it directed me into really a mind-boggling, kind of an amazing investigation.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Bob, because this is very pertinent. You're not just some guy that kind of dreams up some fanciful thing from Zechariah Sitchin's book and writes a little blog about it. This is actually pertinent to you because you're a patriot, Bob. You're a businessman, an investigator, a film producer, a radio personality, author, and federal witness. And like I say, you have patriotic reasons for doing this. I mean, you're talking about black budget money going missing for a possible cataclysm. Who knows? I mean, Bob, let's get into this. This is your reasons for doing this, no?
Yes. What happened, and very briefly, which folks can look at my website and you can kind of catch up to people that don't know who I am or what I have been doing. I've actually been chasing corruption in government for almost 30 years at this point in time, since the 80s when I became a federal witness related to, and it's too complex to get into, so I won't take our time up today on it, but I had a business, and that business I merged with another business corporation here in America, in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was, in fact, a covert Central Intelligence and National Security supplier of weapons, and they were utilizing my company, which was a toy company, they were utilizing it as a covert front for doing the operations that they had been doing all around the globe, and that is supplying weapons for the White House of the United States of America for all these wars that they've been doing for, God knows, 75 years. So, to my surprise, I ended up with my toy company being in the middle of what was, in fact, Central Intelligence secret arms supply operations. And from that point forward, I became a federal witness, and I started doing investigations on the behalf of senators and congressmen here in the United States. And that what I literally have done full time for so many years. But 3-4 years ago, I realized that way above the normal thievery that we have here in America with congressmen and senators under the table stealing millions of dollars for a whole variety of things, and of course even being involved with drug smuggling with our own military, et cetera, et cetera. But above and beyond that, I realized a few years ago that there was not just millions of dollars being disappearing from budgets, but I realized it was billions, and then it even became trillions with a T, and which was actually out of the mouth of the man that was in charge of our Defense Department here, Donald Rumsfeld. And he admitted that they had lost $2.3 trillion from his defense budgets.
And when I remember watching the footage when Donald Rumsfeld was answering to that. I mean, he didn't seem to care too much. I mean, when you talk about trillions of dollars going missing, that's a massive thing, Bob. I'm sorry, that could cripple a country, like.
Well, and of course the point, and that was not in a short period of time. He was referring actually probably over a 10-year period of time. But still, those kinds of dollars vanishing was rather outrageous. And then, of course, we have, and I have to mention this because it was crucial to this story. He made that announcement on the floor of the United States Congress before the Senate and the Congress, and he made that the day before the infamous 9/11 terrorist event here in the United States.
And the computer went missing.
Therefore, we never heard about it again. In other words, 9/11, of course, totally took over all the news, and that was the end of it. And his $2.3 trillion was never looked at past that date because of the timing.
Yeah, and the computer that was allegedly hit by the Pentagon, was the one that held this missing record, 2.33.
Yeah, yes, again, a coincidence.
What a
that
coincidence,
the very
right?
best records that would have maybe helped someone track that disappearing money was, in fact, in the offices that were burned and destroyed by whatever it was that hit the side of the Pentagon on that 9/11